The first time I saw her, she was standing beneath the amber light of the lecture hall projector, her hand poised midair, tracing invisible lines as she explained the anatomy of a poem. Her name was Dr. Evelyn Hart, but most of the students just called her Professor Hart. She wore dark clothes that made her seem like a silhouette against the pale walls, elegant, sharp, and unreachable. I remember the way she read the word desire aloud from the poem, the way her voice softened around it. It wasn't seductive, not exactly, but something about her tone made it impossible to look away. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with her. At 21, I was just another English major trying to finish my last semester, still figuring out who I was and where I fit. But every Tuesday and Thursday morning, when she spoke about art, about how language can touch what hands cannot, I felt something stir in me that I didn't know how to name. After class, I lingered, always pretending to pack my things slower than everyone else. And she noticed. "Staying behind again, Miss Hale?" she'd ask, her mouth curved in a polite smile. I just had a question about the reading," I'd lie, clutching my notebook like a shield. But she always stayed. She always answered. And the more we talked about poems, about the sound of rain against the windows, about her favorite Sylvia Plath line, the more the space between us felt less like teacher and student and more like two people quietly orbiting the same loneliness. Evelyn had that rare kind of presence that made silence feel full. When she listened, she really listened, her eyes locking on you as if your words carried more weight than you believed they did. She didn't fill the air with noise. She let meaning settle. Sometimes, when she'd brush past me to grab a book from her desk, I could smell her perfume, something soft with jasmine and smoke. It lingered on my skin longer than it should have. It wasn't until one afternoon in late October that something shifted. I was in the campus library, rain tapping against the tall windows, when I saw her again, alone, sitting by the poetry section with a book open on her lap. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, something deeper. Before I could stop myself, I walked over. "Professor Hart?" She looked up and smiled faintly. "Clara, you're everywhere I go." I laughed nervously. "I could say the same about you." Her smile deepened, barely, but enough to make my chest ache. We talked for almost an hour, about poems again, but also about music and how she used to play piano before she stopped. I told her I painted sometimes, though I never showed anyone my work. She said, "Maybe you should. The world could use more honesty and color." It was such a small sentence, but something about it cracked me open. When I left the library, the rain had stopped, but I couldn't stop shaking. That night, I dreamed of her, not as my professor, but as a shadow sitting across from me at a cafe, her hand reaching for mine. I woke up guilty, and thrilled, and confused. Weeks passed. The air grew colder. The trees on campus turned to rust and gold. We fell into a quiet rhythm. Classes, questions after lectures, chance meetings in the library that stopped feeling like chance. And then came the day she offered me something unexpected. "Clara," she said after class, "I need a new assistant for the winter exhibition, someone to help catalog the rare manuscripts. You've got an eye for detail. Would you be interested?" My throat dried dry. Working with her, alone after hours, felt dangerous, but also like something I couldn't turn down. "Yes," I said too quickly. Her eyes held my in for a beat longer than necessary. "Good, I'll email you the details." When I walked out of the classroom, my pulse was a steady roar in my ears. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, knowing that whatever was about to happen, there would be no going back. Because somewhere between her lectures and her laughter, between the pages of the poems she loved, I had already started rewriting the story of who I was. And she was the first line. The university library after sunset felt like another world, quiet, cavernous, filled with the hum of old radiators and the scent of paper that had soaked in time. That was where Evelyn and I spent most evenings now. She'd sit behind the oak desk, glasses perched low on her nose, reading through faded manuscripts under the dim yellow light. I'd sit across from her, carefully cataloging, pretending to focus. But really, I was memorizing her. The curve of her wrist, the way she tapped her pen when she was deep in thought, the soft crease between her brows when she smiled without meaning to. It started innocently. It always does. "Pass me that file, Clara," she said one night, her voice low, intimate against the hush of the room. Our fingers brushed. Just that, a brush. But the contact was electric. My hand froze. So did hers. Neither of us moved for a full heartbeat. Then she drew back, cleared her throat, and said quietly, "Thank you." For the next few minutes, all I could hear was the sound of my pulse. It was raining again that night. It always seemed to rain when I was with her. The library windows fogged slightly, turning the outside world into a blur. Evelyn looked up from her notes, removed her glasses, and rubbed her temples. "You should go home," she murmured. "It's late." "I don't mind staying here," I said quickly. "I like it here." Her lips curved. "You like the quiet?" I met her eyes. "I like the company." The air between us shifted, something invisible but undeniable. For a long time, she didn't look away. Then she exhaled softly, almost a sigh, and turned back to the papers. "Clara, you have to be careful saying things like that." "Why?" "Because you're still my student." Her words should have stopped me. They didn't. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't a child, that what I felt wasn't a crush or confusion. It was gravity, the kind that pulls without asking permission. But I didn't. Instead, I stood and began stacking books onto the shelf behind her. When I turned back, she was watching me, not with her usual detached curiosity, but with something rawer. Our eyes met, and it felt like the room itself held its breath. "You're trembling," she whispered. "Am I?" But my voice came out barely audible. Evelyn stood, slowly, as if deciding something she couldn't take back. She stepped closer, until I could see the flecks of gold in her gray eyes. For a moment, I thought she'd touch me. Instead, she said, "You remind me of who I used to be." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I used to believe love could be simple." The ache in her voice almost broke me. She turned away before I could reply, gathering her things, distant again, the professor mask slipping back into place. We should call it a night. I wanted to stop her. I wanted to reach out to say, "Please don't leave," but all that came out was a soft, "Okay." We walked together to the parking lot, our footsteps echoing on the wet pavement. The rain had slowed to a mist. The world felt suspended. "Drive safe, Clara," she said, unlocking her car. "You too." She hesitated, just for a moment, then reached out, brushed a strand of hair from my face. Her fingers lingered, a touch so delicate it almost wasn't there. Then she was gone. I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes before starting the engine, staring at the glowing window of her office in the distance. I knew I should end this before it began, but I also knew that some things weren't meant to be resisted, only remembered. Over the next few weeks, our work continued, but something unspoken ran beneath every word. Our conversations were softer now, our laughter quieter. Every time she smiled, I felt a little more undone. One evening, The power flickered during a storm, plunging the library into shadow. We found ourselves surrounded by darkness and candlelight from her desk. "Looks like the universe is telling us to take a break," she said with a small laugh. I smiled. "Or maybe it just wants us to stop pretending." The air stilled. "Pretending what?" she asked. "That we don't feel this?" Evelyn's expression faltered, a war between reason and desire playing out across her face. She looked down, then back up, at me, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do." I took a step forward. "I've known since the first time you said my name." Silence. Then finally, she moved closer. Our faces were inches apart. I could see the reflection of candlelight in her eyes, the tremor of her breath. "This is wrong," she whispered. "Then tell me to stop." But she didn't. Her hand found mine, and in that fragile, impossible moment, everything we'd been holding back broke loose. We didn't kiss, not yet, but it felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for when we would. When I finally left that night, the air smelled of rain and something I couldn't name, something like hope, something like fear. I knew the line between us had blurred, and I also knew there was no going back. The weeks that followed felt like a dream I didn't want to wake from. Evelyn and I carried our secret like a fragile piece of glass, visible only in the way our eyes met across the classroom, or in the small smiles we pretended were nothing. She had warned me once that love inside the walls of academia was dangerous, that people loved to whisper, that the truth could destroy careers. I understood all of that, but how could something that felt so pure be something we had to hide? Every day, I came to the library just before sunset, and she'd already be there, her hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, eyes tired but warm. We'd talk about books, about life, about the quiet ache of wanting something we weren't supposed to want. It was never loud, never reckless, just quiet, electric understanding. Sometimes she'd make tea, and we'd sit across from each other, sharing the same silence. That silence said everything words couldn't. One evening, she handed me a book. It was an old poetry collection, Pablo Neruda. The pages were worn, underlined in places. She said, "Read page 43. I did. My voice trembled as I read aloud. "I love you as certain dark things are to be loved, in secret, between the shadow and the soul." When I looked up, her eyes were shining. "That's what this is, isn't it?" I whispered. "Between the shadow and the soul." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That night, she walked me to my car again. The air smelled of lilac and rain. I wanted to tell her everything, that I didn't care about rules, that I just wanted her. But when she looked at me, I saw the truth written in her eyes. She was already saying goodbye. "I've been offered a position at Oxford," she said quietly. My heart stuttered. "What?" "It's temporary, just a year." But I could hear the unspoken words behind it, a year that might become forever. "When?" I asked, my voice breaking. "End of term." That was 2 weeks away. I wanted to cry, I wanted to scream, but all I managed was a whisper. "You were never going to tell me." "Were you?" She sighed, looking at the ground. "I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you." "It's too late for that," I said. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain began to fall again, soft, steady, like the universe itself was mourning something it couldn't stop. Then she stepped closer, until our foreheads were almost touching. "Clara," she breathed, "you have to understand, this was never supposed to happen." "But it did." Her hand lifted to my face, trembling as she brushed away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. She said, "I know, and I'll never regret it." It was the first and last time we kissed. There was no hesitation left, just need and sorrow and something bigger than both of us. Her lips were soft, hesitant at first, then certain. The world fell away, the rain, the rules, everything. But the two of us standing in the dark, holding on to something that was already slipping through our fingers. When we finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine and whispered, "You'll do beautiful things, Clara. Don't let me be the reason you stop." And then she turned, walked away into the rain, and didn't look back. The next morning, her office was empty. A stack of books sat neatly on her desk, a note on top written in her familiar handwriting. Between the shadow and the soul. E. I carried that note with me for years. Graduation came and went. Life moved forward the way life always does. I published articles, got a job at the same university, in the same building where I once sat watching her from across a desk. Sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself standing in the same library, tracing my hand over the worn wood of her old desk. The ghost of her presence still lingered, in the scent of old paper, in the flicker of a desk lamp, in the quiet. She never came back, not really. But once, years later, a letter arrived at my office. No return address. Inside, a single postcard from Oxford. On the back, a single line. I still read Neruda. I smiled through the ache, holding the card to my chest, because even though we had parted, even though the world had moved on, love like ours didn't vanish. It simply found quieter ways to live. It lived in the books I loved, in the rain-soaked evenings I still found comfort in the poems I kept folded in my drawer. And sometimes, when the wind rattled the library windows just right, I could almost hear her voice again. Soft, careful, and full of something that never really ended. Between the shadow and the soul.